Welcome back to another episode of Second Career Pilot.
Great to be back.
Today, we're taking a closer look at the National Airspace System, the NAS.
Yeah, the framework for pretty much everything we do in the sky in the U.S.
We've got a lot of detailed information here covering, airspace classifications all the way through instrument approach procedures.
It's a big topic, but essential.
Exactly. Our goal today is really to unpack the essentials, give you a clearer operational picture of the rules, the regs, the procedures.
Basically, how to navigate the system safely and efficiently.
We'll highlight the key things every pilot needs to know. So let's jump right in, starting with the basics. Airspace classification.
The building blocks. The NAS divides airspace into different categories, each with its own rules.
Let's start at the top. Class A.
Right, Class A. Think high altitude. It generally goes from 18,000 feet MSL, mean sea level, up to and including flight level 600.
And over coastal waters, too.
Yep, within 12 nautical miles off the coast. The big thing for Class A. You gotta be on an IFR flight plan. Instrument flight rules only, unless you have specific permission otherwise.
Okay, so strictly controlled, what's below that? Class B.
Class B. This is around the nation's busiest airports. Think LAX, O'Hare, Atlanta.
The big hubs.
Exactly. It typically goes from the surface up to 10,000 feet MSL, and it has that unique shape.
The upside-down wedding cake.
That's the one. It's tailored for each airport, designed to contain all the instrument procedures. And crucially, you absolutely need ATC clearance to enter.
And ATC provides separation.
For everyone in Class B, mandatory clearance, mandatory separation. Very controlled.
Got it. Moving down, Class C.
Class C. Still busy airports, but maybe a step down from the Class B giants. They need an operational tower, radar approach control, and a certain amount of traffic.
And the structure.
Generally surface up to 4,000 feet above the airport elevation. Usually a 5-mile radius core surface area, then a 10-mile radius shelf area, from 1,200 feet up to that 4,000-foot ceiling.
Key requirement here.
Two-way radio communication. You must establish contact before entering and maintain it while inside. No comms, no entry. Simple as that.
Okay. And Class D, similarly but smaller.
Pretty much. Surrounds airports with an operational tower, but maybe not radar approach control systemically like Class C. Goes from the surface up to 2,500 feet above the airport.
Also tailored shape.
Yes, and usually designed to contain any instrument procedures. Again, that two-way radio communication is mandatory before entry and while operating inside. Gotta talk to the tower.
Makes sense. That leaves Class E and G. Class E sounds vast.
It is. Class E is basically all the controlled airspace that isn't A, B, C, or D. Its floor can vary a lot. Sometimes the surface, sometimes 700 feet AGL, 1,200 AGL.
Or even higher.
Right, sometimes up to 14,500 feet MSL. It extends upwards to meet the next bit of controlled airspace. Federal Airways, those Victor Airways we fly, VFR or IFR, those are often in Class E.
And it starts generally at 14,500 feet across the U.S., if not lower.
Generally, yes, up to just below 18,000 feet and also above FL 600. It's a huge chunk of airspace.
In Class G.
Class G is simply the airspace that hasn't been designated as A, B, C, D, or E. So it's
Uncontrolled.
essentially, yes, uncontrolled airspace unless there's, say, a temporary tower set up for an event.
Okay, that covers the standard classifications.
Yeah.
But then there's special use airspace. That sounds important for flight planning.
Extremely important. SUA involves areas where certain activities happen or where flight is limited. You really need to check these during pre-flight.
They're on the charts.
Oh, yeah. It's depicted clearly with details like active times, altitudes, controlling agency, all the info you need.
Like prohibited areas. Sounds straightforward.
It is. P followed by a number. Flight is flat out prohibited. National security usually don't go there, period.
And restricted areas. R number.
Right. These have hazards like artillery firing, aerial gunnery, stuff like that. Flight isn't banned outright, but it's restricted.
So you need permission or ATC routing.
Exactly. If it's active, ATC will route IFR traffic around it. If inactive, they might clear you through. Safety first.
Warning areas. W numbers. Out over the water.
Yes, extending 12 nautical miles off the coast. Similar hazards to restricted areas, but the U.S. doesn't have sole jurisdiction. It's a warning hazardous activity possible.
MOAs. Military operations areas.
MOAs. These separate military training, like acrobatics or intercepts from IFR traffic. ATC might clear IFR flights through if they can ensure separation.
Otherwise, they route you around.
Or restrict you, yeah. They're shown on charts by name, not number.
Alert areas. A number. High volume training.
Correct. Lots of pilot training or unusual aerial activity. You can fly through, but it's a heads up.
Be extra vigilant.
Definitely. Collision avoidance is everyone's job in an alert area.
Okay. Military training routes, MTRs, low and fast.
Often, yes. Used for military tactical flying proficiency, usually below 10,000 feet, sometimes over 250 knots.
IR and VR routes.
Yep. IR for IFR, VR for VFR. The number tells you about the altitude. 4 digits means it's all below 1,500 feet AGL. 3 digits means at least part of it is higher. Good to be aware of, especially low level.
And TFRs, temporary flight restrictions. Need to check NOTAMs.
Always. TFRs pop up via NOTAM for things like forest fires, VIP movements, major events. They protect people on the ground or in the air. Check before every flight.
Lastly, national security areas, NSAs.
NSAs are around sensitive ground facilities. Flight might be temporarily prohibited via NOTAM. Again, check your NOTAMs.
All right. Let's shift to how we navigate IFR federal airways.
The highway system in the sky for IFR flights. They're based on center lines between navaids or waypoints.
How wide are they?
Typically 4 nautical miles each side of the center line. And the floor is usually 1,200 feet AGL, unless the chart says otherwise. We have Victor Airway.
Those are the V routes, lower altitudes.
Correct. 1,200 feet AGL up to but not including 18,000 feet MSL. Odd numbers generally north-south, even numbers east-west.
And jet routes, J routes.
Those are up in Class A airspace. 18,000 feet MSL up to flight level 450, high-altitude highways.
What about RNAV routes?
Becoming much more common. Area navigation routes, you'll see T routes in the low-altitude structure and Q routes in the high-altitude structure, depicted in blue on the charts.
Can you just fly direct between points with RNAV?
Sometimes, yes. Random RNAV routes. But you need ATC approval, and it has to be in radar coverage. Gives you more flexibility.
And there are preferred routes and things like tech.
Yeah, preferred IFR routes help manage traffic between busy terminals. You find them in the chart supplement. Tower on Route Control, or TEC, lets you fly short IFR legs using approach control radar coverage.
NRP for high altitude efficiency.
North American Route Program lets operators plan more direct, efficient routes up high, at or above FL 290. Tools for smarter flight planning.
Which brings us to IFR charts. Gotta know how to read them.
Absolutely critical. 2 main types. High altitude and low altitude, both revised every 56 days. Gotta stay current.
High altitude for, well, high altitudes above 18,000 feet.
Exactly. Shows jet routes, high RNAV routes, relevant navaids, airports, SUA.
And low altitude charts are like the IFR version of sectionals.
Good analogy for use below 18,000 feet. Packed with info, airways, navaids, airports, comms, airspace. The legend is your best friend here.
Explains all the symbols. Airports in blue-green have approaches. Brown means no IAPs.
Precisely. And symbols for navids, frequencies, services, everything you need to navigate safely in IMC.
Let's talk charted altitudes. MEA, minimum and route altitude.
MEA, super important, guarantees 2 things. Obstacle clearance, 1,000 feet non-mountainous, 2,000 feet mountainous, anti-navigation signal reception along the airway segment.
Unless there's an MEA gap.
Correct. That means the signal might not be reliable over that specific part. And watch for errors sometimes. An MEA only applies one way.
A minimum obstruction clearance altitude.
MACA gives you obstacle clearance, same as MEA. But that NEV signal is only guaranteed within 22 nautical miles of the defining navaid. Look for the asterisk before the MOCA altitude on the chart.
MRA, minimum reception altitude.
That's the lowest you can be to reliably identify an intersection using an off-course navaid signal, marked with an MRA flag symbol.
Unless you have DME.
Right. If DME can identify the fix, you might not need to climb to the MRA.
MCA, minimum crossing altitude.
You see that when you're approaching a fix before a segment with a higher MEA, you must cross that fix at or above the MCA. Ensures you clear terrain as you climb. Marked with a flag symbol too, showing airway, altitude, and direction.
MAA, maximum authorized altitude.
That's the highest you should fly on a segment to ensure good navaid reception. Charted as MAXXX. Sometimes signals get weird up high.
And that sideways T.
Means an altitude change, MEA, MAA, or MAA happens at a point that isn't a navaid. Just an airway break with no T usually means the altitudes stay the same.
Okay. Now the tools we use, navaids, VORs, are still key.
Absolutely. VORs are the backbone for Victor and Jet Airways. You'll still see some NDBs too. And DME is crucial for distance info.
Shown in black on the charts for VHF, UHF. Brown for LFMF, like NDBs.
That's the standard on aeronav charts, yes.
How do we identify intersections?
Lots of ways. Open triangle for a reporting point, solid triangle for a compulsory reporting point, also using bearings from NDBs, intersecting localizers.
Feathered arrow for localizers. Left feathers for back course.
You got it. Or bearings from off-route VORs. Small arrows point to the NAVAD. DME fixes use a hollow arrowhead, sometimes with a D symbol for cumulative distance. And GPS, of course.
Charts also show distances between points, box numbers.
Yep. And VOR changeover points, the COP symbol tells you when to switch VOR frequencies. If there's no COP, switch halfway.
Holding patterns still charted.
They are, at certain fixes. ATC might just say, hold as published, so you need to look at the chart depiction for the course direction fix.
RTCC boundaries, blue serrated lines.
Right. Shows you when you're switching between the big en-route control centers. Sometimes you'll see remote site boxes with frequencies too.
And getting weather info from NAVADs.
Many NAVADs broadcast weather. A shadowed box means an associated AFSS, frequencies listed above. RCO boxes for remote comms.
And letters inside the NAVAD box. AHT.
A for SOA's automated weather, H for HIWA's hazardous weather advisories, T for two web transcribed weather broadcasts, super useful in flight.
Technology is changing things, though. Moving maps, MFDs.
Big time. Multifunction displays give amazing situational awareness. Your position relative to airspace, terrain, weather, traffic. It's a huge safety boost.
And electronic flight bags, EFBs. Replacing paper charts.
Increasingly, yes. EFBs store all your charts, supplements, manuals digitally. With FAA approval, they can replace paper. But keeping the database current, usually a 28-day cycle, is absolutely critical.
Okay, leaving en route, we get closer to the airport. Terminal Procedures Publication, TPP.
That's your guide for the terminal area. Arrivals, departures, approaches, airport diagrams, published by region.
Let's talk departures. DPs.
Departure procedures.
Two main types. ODPs, Obstacle Departure Procedures, and SIDs, Standard Instrument Departures. Both give you obstacle clearance and IMC and help streamline things with ATC.
Use them at night or in marginal weather.
Strongly encouraged. They're based on standard criteria. Cross runway end at 35 feet, climb to 400 feet before turning, maintain 200 feet per nautical mile climb unless charted otherwise.
Where do we find them? Textual ODPs are in the takeoff minimums section. SIDs usually follow the approach plates for the airport.
And for arrivals, STARS. Standard Terminal Arrival Routes.
STARS transition you from en route down to a fix where you can start an approach. Smooths out the flow into busy airports.
And if you can't or don't want to fly one,
put no star in your flight plan remarks. Let's ATC know.
Now, the main event. Instrument Approach Procedure Charts. The plates.
The heart of IFR flying, really. They guide you down safely in low visibility. Developed based on strict TPPs criteria, terminal instrument procedures?
6 main sections.
Generally, yes. Margin ID, pilot briefing notes, plan view, profile view, landing minimums, and the airport diagram. Each part is vital.
Margin ID is just the basic info. Airport procedure name, amendment date.
Exactly. Top and bottom margins. Identifies what you're looking at and if it's current.
Pilot briefing area. Notes, frequencies.
Crucial stuff here. The primary NAVAD info, final approach course, then the notes section, circling restrictions, special requirements, radar notes. Very important.
And those triangles. T, A, and A.
Black triangle with a T means non-standard takeoff minimums, check the DP section. Triangle with A means non-standard alternate minimums, check the front of the TPP. A means that airport cannot be used as an alternate, and comm frequencies are listed in order of use.
Okay, plan view. The overhead map.
Right. Top-down view showing routes from en route to the initial approach fix, IAF, shows procedure turns, obstacles, minimum safe altitudes, MSA.
Terrain shown if it's high.
Yes, if it exceeds 4,000 feet above the airport or rises 2,000 feet within 6 miles. MSA circle gives you 1,000 feet clearance within sectors, usually based on a NAVAD or waypoint.
Lots of symbols for NAVADs, fixes, courses.
Big solid lines for the main procedure, dashed for missed approach, IAFs clearly marked, holding patterns shown too.
And TAAs for RNAV approaches.
Terminal arrival areas. For RNAV, they provide a standard way to transition from en route directly to an IAF, often replacing procedure turns. Look for the T structure icons.
Speaking of procedure turns, course reversals.
Yes, when you need to change direction to get established inbound. Could be a forfeit 180 turn, a holding pattern in lieu, or a teardrop turn. Got to stay within distance and altitude limits.
The barbed arrow shows the maneuvering side.
Correct. No barb means no procedure turn authorized, usually indicated by no PT or if you're getting radar vectors. Max speed 200 knots during the turn.
Profile view, the side view.
Yep. Shows altitudes, descent path, distances, fixes, not to scale vertically, but critical for altitude planning. Shows glide slope intercept altitude for precision approaches.
And the final approach fix, FAF, for non-precision. Maltese cross.
Usually, yes. Or a final approach point, FAP, if there's no specific FAF. Profile view shows minimum altitudes at fixes, step-down fixes.
Step-down fixes let you go lower after clearing an obstacle.
Exactly. Allows the lower MDA past that point. If you can't identify the step-down fix, you have to stick to the higher MDA before it.
VDP, visual descent point.
Symbol V on non-precision straight-ins. Point where you can start a normal descent from MDA if you have the runway environment in sight.
MAP, missed approach point, where you decide, land or go missed.
Correct. For an ILS, it's at the decision altitude, DADH. For non-precision, it could be timing, a fix, a navide, or a waypoint. The procedure description is in the pilot briefing.
Profile view shows missed approach icons. Climb, straight, turn.
Yes, and the altitudes are key, minimums, maximums, mandatory altitudes, all depicted clearly.
VDA, vertical descent angle.
On many non-precision charts now. Helps you fly a stable descent from the FAF. Use it with your ground speed to find a target rate of descent.
Landing minimum section. This is critical.
Absolutely. Lowest altitude and visibility allowed for the approach. Depends on approach type, precision on precision, straight in versus circling, and aircraft category.
Categories based on approach speed.
Based on 1.3 times the stalling speed and landing configuration. Category A is slowest, D is fastest usually. Use the next higher category if your maneuvering speed is faster.
Precision uses decision height, DH. Non-precision uses minimum descent altitude, MDA.
Generally, yes. DH or DA now is a decide point. MDA is a don't go below altitude unless specific visual cues are met. Heights are above threshold, HAT for straight in. Height above airport, HAA for circling.
Visibility in miles or RVR.
Either statute miles, SM, or runway visual range, RVR, in hundreds of feet. RVR is runway specific, often required for lower minimums. 24 means 2,400 feet RVR.
Alternate minimums. Standard is 602 for precision, 802 for non-precision.
That's the standard for filing an alternate, yes. But remember that triangle A means non-standard minimums apply for using that airport as an alternate. Check the front of the TPP, and ANA means forget it as an alternate.
Quick note on helicopters.
They often have lower visibility minimums, sometimes down to half of Category A, but not less than 14 mile or 1,200 RVR. They use height above landing, HAL. Some approaches are point in space, just for helos.
Airport sketcher diagram. Last section.
Very important for ground operations. Shows runway layout, taxiways, lighting, obstacles, airport elevation, touchdown zone elevation, TDZE. Study it before taxiing.
Helps avoid runway incursions.
Definitely. Know your taxi route, note confusing intersections. Time speed table might be there for timing from the FAF to the MAP on non-precision approaches. Approach lighting symbols, too.
Inoperative components. What if something's broken?
Sometimes you can still fly the approach, but the minimums might increase. There's usually a table or note explaining the impact of, say, the approach lights being out. Check the TPP and operative components table.
RNAV approaches are becoming common. Different minima.
Yes, RNAV charts can show multiple lines of minimums. LPV, LNAV, VNAV, Barrow VNAV or WAS, LNAV only, and circling. LPV gives you vertical guidance down to a DA, similar to an ILS.
Terminology changing too. DA instead of DH.
Yes, DA, decision altitude, is becoming standard for approaches with vertical guidance. MDA remains for LNAV circling where you level off. TCH, threshold crossing height, applies to the RNAV glide path too.
Where can people get these charts and publications?
Aeronav Products is the FAA source. Their website is aeronav.faa.gov, or you can call them. Commercial providers like Jeppesen also package this data.
Wow. We've covered a huge amount of ground on the National Airspace System.
From the highest Class A down to the approach minimums and airport diagrams. It's a complex system.
Hopefully this overview gives everyone a clearer picture, a better operational understanding of how it all fits together.
It really is an intricate framework, but it's all built around safety and efficiency. The detail on those charts is incredible.
Absolutely. We really encourage you to keep digging into these resources, stay current with the 56-day chart updates, the 28-day database cycles.
And never stop learning. The NAS is constantly evolving. Always ask questions if something isn't clear.
Thanks for listening.